There comes a moment in your life when you suddenly pause in the middle of a busy day, or a quiet night, and realize that the things that once brought you joy now feel strangely hollow, and you cannot explain why, but the colors of life have begun to fade. The excitement you used to feel has been replaced by a dull sense of repetition, and everything you try in an attempt to bring that feeling back only leaves you more confused, because deep inside you sense that something is shifting, something is dissolving, and you are no longer the person who once found happiness in the small distractions that now barely register in your mind. And this is where the journey truly begins, a journey not toward finding more joy, but toward understanding why joy itself has slipped through your fingers. Because for most of your life you were taught to chase things that sparkle, to run after the next achievement, the next relationship, the next possession, the next idea of what life should look like, and you believed that joy was the trophy waiting at the end of each pursuit. But now even when you get what you want, it fails to satisfy the deeper hunger inside you, the hunger that no longer wants entertainment but meaning, no longer wants distraction but presence, no longer wants excitement but truth. And in this strange silence where joy seems absent, something else is trying to speak to you, something ancient, something wise, something that has been drowned for years under the noise of constant stimulation. And Alan Watts once said that when you stop feeling joy, it is often because you have been taught to look for it in all the wrong places. You were conditioned to believe that joy lives outside you, that it hides somewhere in the future, somewhere in a goal, somewhere in a person, somewhere in a lifestyle you have not yet achieved. But the more you chase it, the more exhausted you become, and the more exhausted you become, the emptier everything feels. Because the true problem is not that nothing brings you joy anymore. The problem is that you have outgrown the kind of joy that once kept you entertained. The joy of temporary highs, the joy of shallow accomplishments, the joy of validation and approval, the joy of proving yourself over and over again to people who do not even understand the weight you carry. And now you stand at a threshold where life is quietly pushing you towards something deeper, but because you cannot name it, you mistake this absence of joy for a sign that something is wrong with you, when in reality it is a sign that you are evolving beyond the old version of yourself that once relied on external life to feel alive. And this is the hidden stage of awakening that almost no one talks about. The moment where your soul begins to reject anything that is not aligned with your truth, and everything that once entertained the old you becomes lifeless to the new you. And this emptiness feels like a curse, but it is actually a cleansing, removing the noise so you can finally hear your inner voice. The same voice that was always drowned by constant wanting, constant chasing, constant comparing, constant trying to keep up with the world. And now that your soul is tired of pretending, tired of running, tired of forcing excitement where none exists, you are being asked to sit still and witness what remains when the illusions of joy fall away. Because what you are experiencing is not a loss of joy, but the beginning of real joy forming inside you. And it often starts with a deep discomfort, a sense of meaninglessness, a quiet detachment from the things that used to control you. And though it feels like your life is breaking apart, something deeper is preparing to be born through this very emptiness you fear. The reason nothing brings you joy anymore is because you have unknowingly stepped into the gap between who you were and who you are becoming. And this in-between stage feels uncomfortable because the old pleasures no longer satisfy you, yet the new meaning has not fully arrived. And Alan Watts often described this phase as the sacred pause of the universe. The moment where life takes away the toys you once used to distract yourself so that you can finally see the deeper movement of your own being. Because if those old pleasures still worked, you would cling to them forever and never evolve beyond the surface layer of life. And so the universe quietly drains the excitement from the things you have outgrown, leaving you with a strange emptiness that forces you to confront parts of yourself you have ignored for years, the parts that have been whispering truths you were too busy to hear. And the emptiness you feel right now is not depression, not failure, not a sign of weakness, but an invitation to meet the most honest version of yourself. The version that no longer cares about society's expectations or superficial goals. The version that wants authenticity more than applause, connection more than attention, depth more than noise. And this shift feels like losing joy because you are conditioned to believe joy is always loud, exciting, stimulating, something that bursts into your life with fireworks and intensity. But the deeper joy your soul is now seeking is quiet, peaceful, grounded. And because you have never lived in that stillness, the absence of noise feels like the absence of joy, and so you panic, thinking something inside you is dying, when in truth only your old self is dying. The self that depended on external stimulation to feel alive, the self that needed constant validation, the self that had to chase something in order to feel worthy. And when that identity cracks, It feels like life is slipping through your hands. But really, it is the ego loosening its grip so you can experience life through a different lens. A lens of clarity rather than compulsion. And once you begin to see through this lens, you slowly realize that the reason nothing excites you anymore is because your soul is rejecting anything false, anything shallow, anything that drains your energy rather than expands it. And this phase is terrifying because it feels like losing yourself. But in reality, it is the first time you are meeting yourself without layers of conditioning. And if you pay close attention, you will notice small moments of awareness rising. Moments where you see things more clearly than ever before. Where you feel tired of pretending, tired of performing, tired of chasing happiness that disappears as soon as you touch it. And in those moments, you are closer to awakening than you realize. Because awakening is not a moment of sudden bliss, but a slow unraveling of everything you were taught to believe. And the lack of joy is simply the inner silence that prepares you for a deeper kind of joy. The kind that does not come from success, relationships, or achievements, but from understanding yourself and your place in the universe. And Alan Watts used to say that when nothing external brings you joy, it is because life is pushing you inward, toward the center of your own consciousness, where real joy exists not as an emotion but as a state of being. And when you finally touch that center, you realize that the joy you were chasing all your life was nothing more than a reflection of a deeper joy you had forgotten. But before you can feel that, you must go through this stage where everything loses its color, where life feels numb, where you move through days like a ghost searching for something you cannot name. And though it feels painful, this numbness is cleaning your perception, preparing you to experience life in a way you never have before. And now you reach the final and most important realization, the quiet truth that explains why nothing brings you joy anymore, because somewhere deep beneath all your fears and confusions, you have begun to sense that joy was never supposed to be something you chase. It was supposed to be something you feel when you are aligned with your own existence. And this is why everything external has lost its shine, because joy cannot survive in a life lived for the wrong reasons. And your soul knows it. Your inner being refuses to pretend anymore, and so it has shut down the old sources of excitement in order to redirect your attention inward, forcing you to face the truth that you have been avoiding for years, that the life you were living did not match the life you truly wanted, that the relationships you maintained did not reflect your deeper values, that the goals you chased were built on expectations rather than desire, and that the identity you carried was shaped more by survival than authenticity. And once this truth becomes too loud to ignore, joy disappears because your soul no longer wants you to numb yourself with temporary comforts, and instead wants you to break open, to feel, to question, to evolve, to ask yourself why you are here and what you truly want from this brief existence. And although this stage feels like an emotional blackout, what is actually happening is a reset. A dismantling of the false joy that controlled you so life can introduce you to the real joy that frees you. The joy that arises when you stop fighting yourself, when you stop chasing illusions, when you stop trying to become someone else, and begin to accept the simple truth that your life is meant to be lived from within, not from the outside, and that the real source of joy is your ability to be present, to be aware, to be deeply connected with the flow of reality as it unfolds moment by moment. And Alan Watts always reminded us that you cannot force joy. Because joy is not an achievement, but a consequence, a natural byproduct of living in harmony with your own nature. And right now you are being pulled toward that harmony, even if it feels like your world is collapsing. And soon, without even realizing when the shift happened, you will begin to notice a new kind of joy emerging, a quiet one, a simple one, the joy of breathing, the joy of noticing small details, the joy of understanding yourself, the joy of being alive without needing a reason. And gradually life will begin to feel sacred again, not because everything becomes perfect, but because you finally begin to participate in life instead of chasing after it. And you will realize that the emptiness you feared was actually the doorway to a deeper fullness, a fullness that was always waiting beneath the noise. And when this new joy begins to blossom inside you, you will look back at this stage where nothing brought you joy and understand that it was not the end of your joy, but the beginning of your awakening. The moment where your old self died so your real self could finally breathe. And from that day onward, joy will no longer be something you wait for or search for. It will be something you naturally become. Because once you awaken to your true nature, joy becomes effortless, and your life becomes a quiet, continuous dance with existence itself.